So welcome everyone. My name is Ray Poynter, for those of you who don't know, and I'm the moderator here today, so you won't hear so much from me. Before we kick off, I'd like a big shout out to all of our sponsors. So we love bringing you these events. We can do it without charging because these wonderful companies here all chip in some money that pays for the licensors and the background costs. We're going to have 5 people here on the panel, and we're going to take questions from the floor as we go through. So let's move to the panel discussion. Quick welcome to Laura, Melanie, Gregg, Kristin, and Chuck. And we're going to take a topic from each of them in turn. We'll discuss that for 10 or 15 minutes and then move on to the next topic. So we're probably with you for 60 minutes, 80 minutes, that sort of amount of time. And we're going to start with Laura, who's going to be talking a little bit about how we can do less but get more impact. So Laura, do you want to introduce your topic?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. What I wanted to talk about is my vision and hope for the future, not necessarily a prediction. But I think that as technology has really advanced and we've embraced platforms and automation and all kinds of things, we've become an industry that is a little bit on a hamster wheel about production and less about impact. We spent years, younger people might not know this, but we spent years talking about getting a seat at the table. And we got our seat at the table. But now we're talking project management. We're not talking about the impact and the usefulness and the direction of how we can change companies. So we fought for a very long time to get a seat at the table. And it feels to me, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but it feels to me like we're not taking good advantage of that seat. There's so much, if we did less, if we focused on doing what the business needed instead of standard checklists, if we really listen to internal customers and the stakeholders and how they're planning on using things and what their concerns and doubts are, and we addressed all of that, I think we would have far bigger success. I think the technology is wonderful. I think we should embrace it, but I also think we should let some of this run on its own. When SurveyMonkey was first coming about, I didn't want anything going through SurveyMonkey. It was still very much a control thing. And what I realized quickly was that, first of all, everybody that did one project on SurveyMonkey recognized how much harder it is to run a research project than they thought. So they were happy to hand it back to me. But more importantly, there are a lot of things that people just kind of want to get a sense for, and they can do that through whatever platform allows them to implement it on their own. And my time and energy, I've spent a lot of time on the client side, my time and energy and focus and internal dialogue with people should be much more on what are the things that are moving the needle. When I was in a client position, we took a look one year at everything that we'd done over the past 5 years. And then we said, how much better is the business for what we've done? And we realized that really almost nothing was moving the needle. And we put a pause on all of our ad hoc work. And we concentrated our funds and our energy in one big thing. And we radically changed what our impact was on the company. And so I really think that single-minded focus, that really careful listening to what your internal client needs and not feeling that hamster wheel. I mean, sadly, when I started in Latin America, we were always with small resources. So we picked and chose very carefully what projects we worked on. We couldn't do everything and we recognized it. And everything we did had a big impact. And it seems like now those big impact studies are happening less and less. And I don't think we're doing ourselves any favor by showing how much we can accomplish.
I'm just going to throw in one example of exactly that. So James Wycherley's got this new book out, Transforming Insights. I'm quite a fan of the book, but there's a nice section in there where he's talking about if you're an insight manager, you should often decline to do jobs because they're not going to impact the business outcome enough. If a job is too small, you should tell them to do it themselves, or you should say, well, there's a report from 2 years ago. For the value we're going to get, you should perhaps look at that. So perhaps it starts with not doing some things.
Yeah, I'm a real fan of that.
Who wants to chip in or contribute?
I do.
Excellent.
I always want to chip in and contribute. I have an opinion on everything, as you know, Ray. Well, I mean, two things. To your point, Ray, I think that, and I think this is I'll just give a shout out to Christy Zolke at Knowledge Hound. I mean, I think that, one of the things that she was trying to accomplish with her business is that there's so much data that is, unused or misused internally in big corporations. And so what happens is you end up with a bunch of research waste or a bunch of research that's being conducted over and over and over again when you actually already have those insights within your organization. But I would also say, secondly, to Laura's point, there was a great webinar that Alex Gelman, who's the former CEO of MTAB, gave a few years ago, and he came out of McKinsey, and his webinar was all about why big consulting is eating market research for lunch. And I think that continues, and to Laura's point, we need to not be focused so much on tactics and projects and more on the bigger strategic insights, which is where we get unseated by big consulting firms a lot of the time.
And I think that it's actually kind of both, and coming at this a little differently. And Laura, you brought up SurveyMonkey, and I was there when SurveyMonkey was getting their feet on the ground, and I was one of those researchers that fought against it tooth and nail. But there's a reason that SurveyMonkey is $1 billion organization, and it's not because of market researchers. It's because of people needing information, going out and gathering that information, and whether research is involved or not. So there's a lot of tactical things that have to happen to fill in these information gaps, and it can be done through Kristin, your point about capturing all the historical information, so you don't have to go and redo it, or doing a quick study on SurveyMonkey, or doing your CX through Qualtrics, or whatever that kind of thing is. And there's a lot of information that does need to happen, and we need to be in that mix. That needs to be a component of the insights industry. But Kristin, you made the exact right point. All that has to have an impact at the end of the day. So where's that going to come from? And hopefully it's going to come from the research organization. We'll talk a little bit more about this when I jump in on my soapbox in a few minutes. But there is a process piece that is ownable and should be owned to the extent that it makes sense. If it doesn't need to, get it out into the organization. But at the same time, we've got to come in and say, this is what it means, and this is why we're doing it. So the impact has to happen. And I was talking with someone from Unilever yesterday, and said, if you're not sitting at the table, then you're on the menu. So,
yeah. So, I mean, my topic is actually going to be a business impact here in just a second. But so focusing on Laura's topic, I think there's a slight counterpoint I'd like to offer, and that's do more with more. And the reason I say that is because the brands that I'm hearing from, they feel that the world around them is changing really, really fast. And they need to be in what they call a culture of continuous iterative learning. So they have really big constant learning needs. They don't necessarily want to do less, but they do want everything they do, to your point, Laura, to have a real education component that drives change in the business outcomes. And so I agree with your point about it all needing to have business impact, and that's my chat here in a second. But I don't think it necessarily means do less. I think it means do more with more, because they want this constant culture of data coming in that tells them what's going on in the world around them. The outcomes, the punishment for failure in our world today for getting a message wrong, the punishment for failure is pretty high. And so they want constant feedback from the world around them so that they much reduce their risk of making a wrong move. It's a great place for us as an industry to be, but we actually have to make sure every piece of data that flows in has a real business outcome and is plugged into the right place where the decisions are made. But so I would advocate for do more with more.
Well, maybe it's just semantics, Melanie, but I guess the way I think of it is our time, the research and insights people, we should try to be doing less so that we can focus on the impact. And not that the company should try to manage with less. With platforms and automation and so many other new tools now, there's still ways to bring all that into the business that don't require our time, so we can really be focused on what's going to impact change.
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
The brands that I'm hearing from do talk about that ecosystem of technology enabled data coming into the organization, and not always having to say, okay, I need information, I'm going to go run a project. They can go find the data they need within their ecosystem of insights, data, passive data, knowledge systems. That's a good point. And then and using all of that to have the researchers bring it together to tell a compelling story.
Yeah, I mean, I just find that as we get involved, we get very precious about methodologies and perfection, and we want things, and we always believe that it won't be done right if we're not involved. Sorry for that generalization. But I think if we can learn to let go of some of that and not worry about all that being so right, and we can worry more about our internal customers and what they're needing and the stakeholders and having those dialogues instead of managing the process, I think everybody wins.
There are some great comments in the chat, so whenever we get a chance to have a look at those, not questions, just comments. I'm going to pick up one that Carl said there, going to what Laura and Melanie have just been saying at. One of the issues about a project, if we get the stages, we've got collect the data, analyze the data, find the story, rehearse the storytelling. And then if you look at how much time is spent, that rehearse the storytelling should take a couple of days. That finding the story should take a few days. And all of that gets compressed into the last afternoon because we spend so much time getting the data and running through the data. We really need to do a lot more with the stuff we get. So that's kind of in between what Laura, I think, and Melanie are both saying. Maybe we get a bit less data, but then we do more with it and we sell the story more convincingly. Chuck, you've been very quiet so far. Do you want to chip in on this one? Right, okay, so let's move to our next topic. And the next topic is connected, and the next one after that is connected, which is great. And then we're going to take a bit of a diversion. So, Melanie.
Yeah, so my topic is completely related. It's about a groundswell of focus on creating business impact. It's less about the technology aspects, which Laura was talking about, and more about the process of ensuring that the work that we're doing is designed to deliver business impact, and that business impact is measured. So it starts with this process of, for every project that we're doing, and I would encourage each of you as you kind of go back to your desks in the afternoon or on Monday, to stop and look at the projects that you have in front of you and ask yourself, do I really know the business impact that I am trying to help my client drive, or that I am attempting to drive, my internal client or my external client? Do I really know the actual business impact that this data or research is designed to drive? Do I know the real business question that's being asked? And if you don't, stop and make sure that you articulate that question and make sure that everything is designed to deliver the answer to that question. And then it's delivering business impact. A series that we're going to begin working on is about making sure you have a process internally to create the business question, to measure the business answer, to actually measure the business action, because if there's no action taken, then it was a waste of activity. And then to begin to develop a culture of celebrating actions that drive research that drives action. So proving value add, driving action, and developing a culture of success. This is what I'm hearing from a lot of the brands that we're talking to. They're starting to implement even nascent crawl, walk, run processes within their organizations that make sure that there is a system, an actual system created to ask a business question, write out the business answer, see how that answer was driven into the organization to drive actual action, and then measure the impact of that action so that you can create a culture of success. I'm really excited about this, and I think it takes everyone in our ecosystem to make this happen. We've talked for years about driving ROI, and rather than get into complicated measurement programs, we can do simple things as an industry, track the business questions, track the answers, track the action taken, and then be able to say, as an industry, we're driving value that actually changed a campaign, improved a product. In the most mature versions of this, they will get to more complex ROI calculations, but you don't have to start there. You can start with a crawl process, and we're seeing many of our brand members talk about implementing these in their organizations, and we're really excited about it. So we're going to be partnering with them to help drive that across the industry. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I've got a quick question for you, Melanie, first. So will this build on the stuff that GRBN did, or is it a separate strand?
It will build. GRBN, as if you guys know, GRBN is a sort of a much more mature model. It requires, some in-person consulting and an entire change management process. So what we're hoping to do is build the crawl version and the walk version of those, so that companies that can't get all the way to a mature version of business ROI from research or return on insights can start with some processes around that are more of a crawl mechanism, and reminding them of a simple process that can get them to stop talking about projects and start talking about insights and value when they're talking to their board members and their funders within their organizations. They're not a cost center, they're a value add center. Great
points. Who would like to chip in?
I don't think I'm going to chip anything in, but I do have a question, which is, the time to insight is more and more critical now. Is there kind of a structure in what you guys are bringing forth that looks at the time to value?
There will be, certainly. And, there is this process, this communication that we're going to talk about. People will say, I don't have time to follow a process because it will slow me down. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't follow some of these basic steps, it will slow you down anyway, because you'll end up answering the wrong question or answering a question that doesn't drive impact. Or if you can't prove your value to an organization, you can end up getting your budgets cut. And so this process will do a lot to ensure process and not a quick process, though, and not slow you down.
So there's a couple of things in the question strat. The first one is GRBN ? That's the Global Business Research Business Network. So it's the MRS from the UK, it's Insights Association, it's the TRS in Australia, and a whole bunch of other national organizations leveraging resources together.
Yeah, it's an association of associations, essentially. So we all cooperate together and share information to make ourselves better at what we do for you. And
we've got a question in the Q&A. Is there a good source to read on the crawl, walk, run process?
As far as I know, there's not today. This will be, unless some of you have a resource, but this will be something that the Insights Association, in cooperation with other partners, both on the brand side and on the association side, will roll out later in the year.
Great.
I'll just chip in here, having done this on the brand client side in a couple of organizations. We all were quite aggravated when asked to prove a ROI. We thought, we're not here to work for the auditors. We're here to make an impact. We're busy making an impact. Don't divert our precious resources. And we really grumbled, to be frank. It was worse than having to do an audit. But what happened is we took a variety of cases. We looked at things that had already been implemented a couple of years ago, so that we had sales data afterwards through different seasonality and everything else. And we were able to show that we'd actually had a huge impact. And then everybody left us alone. We did the exercise and we were done. And so for everybody that is bemoaning this, I think there is actually an opportunity. If you do it right, it doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. It also helped us get a lot more budget going forward. And so then we decided it was a worthy exercise to repeat with whatever frequency, not on every single project we do, but to demonstrate when we started having naysayers, remember, we're actually making a huge contribution. Think of it as an insurance policy of minimizing risk and maximizing opportunity. So I'm all for it, Melanie.
Yeah, and it's also just a very good way to make sure that we really understand the business outcome we're trying to drive, and then make sure that the research is designed to answer that outcome, and then to track it. And the last part that I think is so important is for insights departments all over the world to begin to celebrate their impact. So if you can measure your impact, you can celebrate your impact. You can celebrate it to the CFOs at budget time, but you can also celebrate it as a team and as an industry. And I think as an industry, we need to do a much better job of celebrating the work that we do and the impact that we have on society, much less projects, products, and services. So yeah, it certainly will solve the financial aspects, and it will make us better researchers, and it will help us learn to celebrate what we do more.
I can see that Kristin has just unmuted herself, so I'm sure you have something to add.
Well, I think the irony around that, Melanie, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think that we need to do a better job of, you know, measuring our impact overall on organizations and on organizational KPIs. I think the ironic thing about market researchers is that we are literally the worst at both marketing and researching ourselves. I mean, horrible, like, you know, don't believe in spending money on marketing, don't want to research our own brands. You know, I think it's you know, I think we're so used to doing it for other folks that we don't want to be bothered with it for ourselves. But I think it's a huge component of this celebration aspect and recognizing the value that we provide within organizations.
And then turning that into a good marketing process to market our industry and to improve our industry's brand. I love that.
Yes.
So we're going to stick with the topic, but at that point, I'm going to bring Gregg in, who's going to put another dimension to that.
Okay, I love this conversation. Thank you for inviting me into this, Ray. This has been, I'm really enjoying myself and learning a lot in this process. But I want to talk a little bit about bifurcation in the industry. And I learned the word bifurcation about 10 years ago, and I've used it every possible time since I first learned it. So, and what was happening, we were sitting back taking a look at successful suppliers. Excuse me. And what I mean by successful is they were growing at 20% year over year or more, and just kind of saying, who are these suppliers and what do they look like? And what we found then is that there were mainly two kinds of organizations that fit this 20%, that were common in this 20% plus growth rate. And one of those was a data-centric model. And what I mean by that is they had new types of data or easier ways of gathering data or different ways of analyzing or visualizing data, something very data-centric, right? And then on the flip side of that was a consulting model. And what I mean by that is that they were looking at issues from more than a single project perspective. Tended to be data agnostic, kind of often looked at both the market and the consumer point of view, or had some specific expertise in a business issue like branding or pricing, or an industry vertical, or some kind of framework like agile or behavioral economics. There was some specialization in that was allowing them to bring a depth to the answers that a single project doesn't normally allow. So those were kind of the two categories of companies that seemed to be doing well on the supplier side. The suppliers that weren't doing well tended to not have any particular focus in terms of business issue or vertical, and they tended to be project oriented. And those were generally we're losing a little bit of ground or gaining a little bit of ground, but not much. And we can talk about some of the reasons behind this in just a second. But when we looked at brands for a different project, not long after that, and using some grit data, we started to see the same thing. So using in the research industry trends data, we categorize brands, or they're self-categorized into a few different functions under insights. You could be strategic insights, in-house research, or voice of the customer. There's a couple of other categories, or some hybrid. And what we found is if you wanted to grow in budget or headcount, you needed to be an in-house researcher or see yourself as strategic insights. And those kind of align to this data-centric versus consulting-centric model. If you're not sure what you're doing, you're a hybrid of it, you're a jack of all trades, you're trying to be strategic insights and voice of the customer and do the research, and you weren't necessarily being successful at any of this. So I think that this is an indication of what we have available to us through technology. Laura, as you were brought up at the very beginning of this, we can fill some of the process gaps that used to take us, several weeks. And we, marketing research owned the process, and we were very, hold it very close. Some of that still exists. That doesn't seem to be an effective model for success if we define success as some kind of growth, either in revenue or budget or headcount. And what I think that this means is we're kind of like a college sophomore. It's time to pick a major and stick with it. And I think either of those majors work. I think one is way more interesting than the other, but it can be designed, and either a brand or a supplier can be designed around either of those approaches and be interesting, compelling, and important work. But you kind of have to pick one side or the other. If you're trying to do it all, it's very, very difficult. And if the brand data is any indication, it's not where success is.
So Greg, to summarize, is it kind of a choice between a Walmart and an artisan?
I don't think so. I think it's the difference between being able to buy the pieces or being able to buy the whole. And so some of the organizations that are providing the pieces, and I don't really want to name names, particularly on the brand side, but they are getting information into the hands of the end user quickly, effectively, without a lot of value add, and that value add is coming from the person that needs to make the decision. That value add has to happen somewhere. It can happen anywhere along that chain. It can happen in the research function. It can happen in the marketing function or the product development function or whatever it is. It has to happen, but where that happens is, I guess, the difference.
Great. So Melanie, you've just unmuted, so I think that's a clue.
Yeah, well, I think that the industry needs both, right, Greg? Like, I think we need both types of buying models and delivery models or whatever. I think we need both types of partners, because I think some brands want to add the value themselves with their own internal teams and really just want, the information. And those types of relationships still need a lot of expertise and consulting to make sure it's designed, like I said, to give you the right data to add the value. But then there are other relationships where you really want an expert to come in and guide you through the process of creating the value and the outcome strategy, because maybe maybe it's outside your area of expertise. Like not every insights department can have a really sophisticated pricing modeler on their team to really, so I think that you need both, right? And you're just suggesting that you either need to be comfortable in the skin of being more of a data partner provider, or be comfortable and competent in your skin of being an actual value adding impact generator. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And the other piece of this that I'm suggesting is if you are the generalist jack of all trades, that's a bad place to be instead of a good place. It's bad for anticipated growth in the industry.
So Chuck, if we're talking about specialists, Chuck, this is right in your main street. That's kind of your department's function, is, I would guess, isn't it, at Leisure?
I'm not sure Chuck can.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know. Something happened. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm just saying that the need for specialists really speaks very strongly to what you bring to the picture, both in terms of your teaching, but also the unit.
I'm holding back on that, Ray, because I have a completely different view of what is likely to happen. So I've been listening to Melanie, Laura, Gregg, and I totally agree on the one hand. On the other, I'm just thinking this all may be irrelevant in 5 or 10 years. Okay,
you have us on tenterhooks.
That's the reason why I'm holding back, because it will be. So I'm not. As it stands, they all make sense. They make eminent sense. But are we going to be in this place in 5 or 10 years now? 10 years ago, Ray, you predicted that 10 years from now, research won't exist the way that it existed 10 years ago. And it is true. What I am going to predict today is 10 years from now, it'll be so totally different that it won't be there. I wonder whether there'll be marketing research. So right. I'm holding back.
Okay, you keep your powder dry, and we look forward to that. Kristin.
Yeah, I mean, to Gregg's point, and I think this is the challenge I see a lot, because obviously I do a significant amount of consulting work in this industry, particularly around sales and marketing strategy and positioning for firms. And I think that the mid-sized market research firms that are really struggling are the ones that are generalists. They don't have a key point of differentiation. They're trying to be all things to all people. And I think that there's this misnomer that if you do all kinds of research and you service all kinds of clients, that you're going to get more business. I find quite the opposite to be true, which is that people don't really know what to call you for. They don't know what types of business you specialize in. And so I do think that there's a greater segmentation happening in the industry in terms of not just skill set, but vertical skill set that is really important, I think, to the future viability of a lot of the smaller to mid-sized firms in this industry.
I'm going to bring another question in now that's been sat there for a while, but I think it's a great time. And Melanie, you might want to have the first crack at it. Thinking about impact over process, are there new buyers inside of client organizations who we should be thinking about and talking to and working with?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so in this thought process that in the past or even in the present, we're working with the insights department, and the insights department is sort of bringing in and pushing out information from the rest of the stakeholders. There are the product officers and the tech officers and the even the service officers that are looking. The world is changing so fast right now because of a variety of reasons, and some of those people are reaching out directly to get information and data. That said, some of the brands are saying that as a result of so much information and data coming in and out of an organization, that they are becoming more like a post office, like a controller. They sort of get the information and they filter it and they push it back out to the right people. If you go to a chief marketing officer, for example, he's inundated with COVID data and ethnicity and diversity data, and he doesn't know what to do with with all of the information that he's getting, and he doesn't know how to filter it and say that this data is good for this business decision, and this data is good for this business decision. So I actually really encourage us not to forget about the insights departments as a key avenue of getting the right information for the right business question out to the organization. And yet, yes, there are new buyers, the service leaders and the product leaders and the tech leaders, and even the diversity leaders. Diversity data is really important right now. So, yes, but don't forget about the insights leaders, because they are a trusted resource to make sure that the data is a fit, because there's so much data, that the data is a fit for the business decision being made.
Anybody else on that point? We also have a query in the chat stream from Carl, if anybody wants to pick up on the best resources to locate agencies that specialize in different types of research. So I guess there's the Green Book directory, Gregg, but in addition,
can I just jump in, Ray? Because I think the directories are really hard. Like, of course, like SMR has a directory that's excellent. I know Insights Association has one, there's so many directories. The issue that you run into in directories is that people will say they do every single kind of research in order to come up in the directory listings as much as possible. And so what I would say is, yes, of course, directories are a great place to start, but also this is why I encourage, firms to have a really good organic SEO strategy, and that they're really focusing on terms and methodologies that they specialize in, that they want to be able to sell to clients, and to also ask for referrals. I mean, I probably get 8 or 9 emails a week from people asking me like, oh, who should I use for this? Or like, I have a multicultural research project, who should I use for that? And certainly I wouldn't say, I'm the end all be all of resources for research firms, but I do think like referrals and talking to people who have worked in those sectors before are a really good way of understanding who are the firms that are doing the best work in those verticals.
And I'll just kind of jump in on that. And if you want to send me an email, I'll try and do some referrals for you. Happy to help if I can.
Melanie.
Well, and I would say that the organizations really need to create a process around listening to the market and to the suppliers, the new people, a really strong vendor process. It seems, burdensome to go through all of the emails that you get every day and whittle through them and find the right partner. But if you're not connected to what's going on in the industry, you're going to miss the new technology, the new type of research, the new partner that just reinvented how to do conjoin on a mobile device, whatever. So these organizations, they need a vendor selection, a vendor listening, not selection, but a vendor partner listening program. Someone dedicated in the organization to attend all the conferences and hear from the newbies, to go to the events, to read through every email that comes in, to look at the websites and find those nuggets of new providers that are out there and bring them into the organization and tag them internally for what their specialties are. I am such a firm believer that not enough process is in place at the brands to really listen to the market about what's coming that's new, and to create new partnerships every day that keep you current as an insights department.
And I would just add to that, Melanie, great advice. When you go back to face-to-face events, go into the exhibition. Sometimes bunk off from a presentation because the exhibition can give you more time, and spend some time talking to the people on the stand. And coming back to Kristin, go to the stands that have got one big idea, that they're promoting this new, big, strong idea. So if we come back to Isaiah Berlin's hedgehogs and foxes, actually you're looking for hedgehogs when you're looking for new techniques. Somebody who's got a technique they're really betting on. Okay, so we're going to come to the first of the 2 changes in direction. Kristin.
Yes. So I'm going to be talking about the impact of the VC and PE money flowing into this space on data ethics and industry ethics. And I just want to do some context setting in terms of what's going on in the industry in terms of private equity and venture capital right now. Because certainly when I started out in research, which was in the mid-90s, I really did not know of any private equity backed firms or any firms that had been funded by venture venture capital. I mean, it wasn't until I started my own firm that I even knew that taking on money from outside investors was an option. And so, today it's sort of standard. If you've got an early stage firm, chances are a lot of those firms are taking on money. But to do some sort of level setting as to where we are right now as an industry, even after a rough 2020 for many people in the business, private equity and venture capital firms continue to invest at levels that we have not seen since what we called the kind of the big data surge of 2014. And there's been a particular focus, obviously, as you can imagine, on technology transformation and mergers. And I'll share just a few examples with you just from this last year, which was the height of the pandemic. Early stage analytics firm Quantilope raised $28 million in July. I mean, that was right in the middle of the pandemic, when a lot of people were seeing major downturns. As everyone knows, longtime industry player Confirmit was acquired by Swedish PE firm Verdane, and then they went on to acquire Daprosy and has most recently merged with Focus Vision. Like, full disclosure, I sit on the board of that company. And then, everyone's seen what's happened recently in the IPO markets. Courtright IPO'd at a staggering, $27.3 billion valuation. Cint recently IPO'd on the Swedish NASDAQ at a $1.21 billion valuation. And so, a lot of the influence and the management behind those firms is now being run not by researchers, but by money people, so private equity and venture capital. And I want to just talk very briefly about how that impacts data ethics and data quality within the industry, because I think it's something to be really cognizant of. I think there's three components that will ultimately drive ethical data use in our industry. The first, and it's something that I've written and blogged about and already spoke about once this morning at a conference in Germany, but that's to make sure that the systems and the technologies that we develop are unbiased and that they're ethically designed. And as I said, I've written and posted about the dangers of unethical AI that can literally be weaponized against the population, and that also applies to research, from facial recognition to location tracking, or by hardening people into categories that don't fit well, such as gender or sexual orientation. I mean, I think these are all things that associations are kind of looking at from a data privacy and ethics standards. Secondly, we really have to be working together, and this is to Melanie's point about GRBN or SMR, whatever global association you're involved in, is that, research quality standards really have to be upheld globally. And that's why close collaboration and sharing of best practices between associations, both local and global, are really important to make sure that we're acknowledging cultural differences and nuances, which also impact data ethics and data privacy. And lastly, and this is where this ties into private equity and VC money coming in, we need to make sure that our business models aren't driving unethical behaviors. And that's where it becomes really problematic. When traditional business models don't adapt and research pricing becomes a race to the bottom, which it has been for years now, then we see firms adopting unethical recruiting and other research practices, which further deteriorate research quality. And it really endangers our reputation as an industry. I look at a lot of the business models particularly from full service research firms. They've not really been updated since I started out in research in the mid 90s. If we look at sample pricing, for instance, we had folks like Bob Lederer who made a big push maybe 10 years ago around sample quality, and there were lots of discussions around it, and then those discussions eventually disappeared entirely. There's not much talk about it. And I do think there's incredible pricing pressure that's coming, again, not from researchers per se, but the investors and the folks running these big research agencies. So open for questions.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think this is so important. We've always said that as an industry, we've been fortunate not to have a lot of government interference in our world. And we've gotten a lot of exceptions because we're doing research for the world's good. The moment that can turn is the moment when we can no longer be trusted to not have a duty of care around how we use the data and around the people that are participating in the research. And so that's what all of this, association code of ethics and quality standards are really for, is a duty of care to the buyers for making sure that they're getting quality data, but duty of care to the participants, and between the two to make sure that we don't have some big breach that comes in, and as a result of some harm done or perceived harm done, the government says, whoa, maybe we should get involved, and start to whittle away at the exemptions that we've been given as an industry. So this is so important. And I think, one of the potential, there need to be some answers, even in the world of more VC and PE and finance money in the world coming into our sector. There just still needs to be sort of this voice of ethics that sits somewhere in every organization. Sometimes that's the chief research officer, although sometimes having held that role, you can be considered a nerd, right? So this person needs to have the respect and the sway to say, here's where the line stops. They need to wear the white hat and be respected to have a reasonable, voice of, here's a solutions-based approach to getting you what you need, but here's the ethics-based line in the sand that we have to draw. And every company needs that person in their organization that draws the line for them, but then helps them figure out a different solution to get, at what they're trying to get at. And so I thank you. It's a really important conversation.
Yeah, I think too, Melanie, I think that, one of the challenges that we have too is, and, we're looking at this at SMRs, we look at expanding our membership, based, like how are we more inclusive of data scientists and data as a service companies? When you look at a lot of the new firms that are coming in, to Ray's point, I kind of do what he does at conferences. I skip some presentations, I walk around the exhibit hall, and I like to meet any firms that I've never heard of before or that are new into the space. The challenging thing is that a lot of these firms are venture backed, so they have money, they're going to scale quite quickly, but they also are not being run by researchers. And so they don't understand the fundamentals behind how do you conduct research in ethical and responsible ways, and how are we being respectful of respondents and the use of their data. And so I think that there's, it's a multi-layered issue for sure.
Yeah, the idea of being, kind of fair and ethical with people's data, and even compensating them and data quality, these are all intermixed. And I think we're going to see some business models start to shift off of that. I've talked to a few companies over the course of the past few years that are making progress in this idea of sample quality and general fairness for compensation. I don't know if it has an impact on the ethical business model that still pushes for higher and higher margins under almost any circumstance, but some of the residual impact of that approach is we're seeing progress on a resolution to that. And to your point, Kristin, you said sometime in the 90s, Bob Lederer was working on sample quality. I've been in this industry now for a long time, and I've probably been engaged in 4 different initiatives across my career that brought this. The first time was I was with AT&T, and we had AT&T and Procter and Gamble and all these different companies coming. We demand better quality, and then 5 years later I was with someone else and we demand better quality, and it happens every 5 years. It'll happen in another 5 years, and hopefully one of these times it'll stick and something will happen.
So we're going to go to Laura, and then we're going to Laura, and then we're going to take very quickly the 3 questions, 2 in the Q&A stream, 1 in the chat stream, and then we're going to move to the dry powder. Laura.
So I just wanted to throw in here that I don't think most end clients, the buyers, really care about this very much, and that might be part of why we stagnate. I think they assume that ethical use of data their vendors are taking care of, or the supplier partnership that they have, whatever level it is, they believe that's happening behind the curtain, and I'm worried about my business results, so don't talk to me about your internal processes. There are a few that care and want to know, but I think as a general rule, they don't. I also think that they think my business need supersedes any of this. I don't think they think of the wider impact of what that means, that technology that you're pushing for, because your business is demanding more of you, and the role of CMOs has changed so dramatically. What they are being asked to deliver is getting higher and higher pressure. So I think when they're under pressure, they ask us to do things. They know in their heart, they believe that what they're doing is good. They don't think about the major impact. And we go down the slippery curve of, they're not talking about what I need you to do for me. And more than 10 years ago, I was in a meeting in Esselmeyer in Amsterdam, and back when call centers were a thing, someone revealed to us that all those call centers in India that we were maybe not comfortable knowing that they were the ones that were getting outsourced for our field work. We knew it was happening. What we didn't know is that from India, they were outsourcing to Bangladesh, and Bangladesh had people making the calls from their homes on their cell phone with all the personal data that we're all so protective of. Now, a lot of things have changed for data protection, but honestly, it was surprising that we didn't know, and nobody cared at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and I personally don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that it's so complicated and requires so much time and energy to really understand sampling, understand data, understand ethics, and understand the processes that they simply don't. I mean, I've spent my career in this, and it, I've become an expert as a result, but the average corporate researcher cannot spend their career understanding data, origins and ethics and sampling and quality and representativeness. And so I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that they're really relying on their partners to carry this for them. And they're having the best hopes and intentions that they're doing it right. And so I think that's this problem to solve, is how I think that if they could truly make quality buying decisions, they would do so in a blink. But there are no really strong quality buying signals. And that's probably what we have to solve for as an industry.
So we're just quickly going to take the 3 questions we already had, because we do need to move on. So with so many data streams coming from outside research and getting mixed, blended, routed in the US, how is it possible to ensure data quality? Once we have all of those things going on.
I'll give my perspective, which I think it's tough to guarantee any sort of data quality in those situations. And I mean, I think this was something Melanie was just saying, which is, it's interesting to me that it is almost impossible for someone on the brand side to keep track of data quality. That's really a supplier's job, is to ensure the quality of the data. That said, what's concerning to me is that the quality messaging from our industry perspective seems to have completely disappeared. And it's almost being, there's so much emphasis on agile and doing things quickly, or like even, and I don't want to pick on Lucid, but I'm just going to use one of their, because I saw a tagline message from them that was like, no. But one of their taglines was, their tagline message was like, unlimited answers for limited budgets. And I saw that and I was just like, oh, please, not unlimited answers for limited budgets. Like, there has to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere there.
I'm going to pick up on one from the other side, from the chat stream, GLG expert networks. Do we think there's any reason to believe that expert networks doing B2B research would be better or worse than market research? Or do you think we'd have a similar distribution?
I mean, full disclosure, like I do work with GLG. So, I think that they've built up this kind of high level network of B2B interviewers that I think fits within our ecosystem. Like, I don't think that, they do any better or worse work than any other research company does. I think they have a much different model when it comes to how they've developed their panel, and also about how they compensate their respondents. I mean, when they're emailing me to take part in a 10 or 20 minute survey, they're offering me over $100 to do it. You know, they're not offering me one chance to win $25. So it's a different business model.
Yeah, and we talked to a lot of different brand researchers that GLG or Alpha Sites or whichever company is a part of their toolkit, you know, for the work that they're doing. So it's seen as a research company in many ways.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I just think it's about fit for purpose for the audience. I think there's room for all of us, all of them, everyone. And then you just have to make a decision based on your research objectives and what you're trying to accomplish and the audience you need to speak to. Is it an expert network? Is it a more traditional quant panel company? Is it phone? Is it, you know, do you want to go do in-person intercept somewhere? I think that it's just about your research objectives and fit for purpose. And it's not a conversation with Melanie unless she says fit for purpose. So there you go.
so we have.
I mean, I think, you know, I think part of it.
Sorry,
part of the
Kristin, we are really running a bit long. I'm just going to throw this question in, and it's probably going to you.
Okay, good. Well, then I can finish what I was going to say.
Do we think the focus on multipliers and valuations has impacted the focus of the industry?
Oh, 100%. 100%. You know, I probably get, you know, a half a dozen calls a month from full service firms that think if they develop a technology solution that their multiplier is going to go up or their valuation is going to be higher. I mean, a lot of the work that I do right now, you know, now also working in investment banking, you know, is start working with firms 12 to 24 months before they're going to sell in order to maximize their valuation. I think a lot of firms don't realize, like, you don't need a technology platform in order to get a good valuation. What you do need to have is low customer concentration, which means a relatively wide customer base. You know, you need to have some kind of recurring revenue stream. And I think there's a belief that full service firms can't, you know, have recurring revenue, which I don't think is the case at all. You know, and you've got to have differentiation. So, but yes, absolutely. I think that people are obsessed, and you know, particularly since the Qualtrics sale, and I'm sure Gregg can probably, you know, chime in here as well because he works in a similar space. I mean, I think since Qualtrics got their valuation, I mean, people have gone a little bananas about what they think the value of their own companies are, and those have been some really tough conversations that I've had to have with some firms. Yeah.
Yeah, Qualtrics didn't help.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all want to be tech companies with recurring revenues. So now we're going to
But you can all have recurring revenues, and that is my point. I think people think that you can't have it unless you're a tech company.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not the case.
And you have to think about this with outliers in mind.
Yeah.
Every data set has outliers.
So now we're going to take the big pivot, and Chuck, the floor is yours.
Okay, I have a different perspective. I'm not saying it's right, but that's my perspective. What I'm saying is, over the past, in our lifetime, the biggest disruptive technologies are fast computing and the internet. Okay, probably it's the most disruptive technologies to ever exist. But what I'm seeing is these two technologies have given birth to 14 different industries. And these industries are driving different technologies. For example, automotive driving, blockchain technology, genomics, remote diagnosis and cure, and things like that requires a lot of artificial intelligence. Deep learning, where the computers learn to write code without human intervention, and cloud computing. And they are growing at a very, 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 very fast rate. And the costs are coming down equally fast. For example, AI cost went down 37% last year. That means in 5 years, what costs $100 today will cost $9. In 10 years, it'll cost 9 cents. So what are the implications of these to marketing research? I suspect if AI, deep learning, and cloud computing becomes universal and cheap, That means we can do away with marketing research as we know now. And this is not, I'm not talking about science fiction. Think about Google or Amazon. They did not go with a 10-point scale to find out what consumers are going to do next. They had access to artificial intelligence, and that's what they used to become huge companies. Assume the same technology is available to everyone at a fraction of the cost. Then why do we need marketing research? For example, if instead of doing 10 focus group, if AI can analyze 1 million conversations that's happening in the internet, and deep learning could process it and constantly update it, and cloud computing can compute all that and constantly feed, then we don't need focus groups. The same way, if it can integrate all the data and consumer behavior, then predict what's going to happen next. Why do we need quantitative research or even analytics? Because it's all done by the computers. And it is not science fiction. Consider autonomous driving. It has to make millions and millions of decisions. It cannot afford to be wrong even 1 in a million times. Every year, about 16,500 people die in car accidents in the US. If autonomous driving cost equal number, it won't be acceptable. It has to be close to zero. That means computers have to make decisions which are better, far, far better than human beings can make. And the computers are already making such decisions in areas like autonomous driving, genomics, and gene sequencing and all. It will be a child's play to apply that technology to marketing research. So my question to you is, there is a possibility that marketing research may not exist in 10 years, or it will exist, but it won't be in the way it is now. So all the things we are talking about, I find it fascinating, all the talks I've heard so far. But I'm looking and saying, what all these things become irrelevant? Not because they are irrelevant today, but if technology overtakes, if singularity is so near, can this happen? And I suspect it will happen in some form or the other.
An interesting thought, Jack. If we were to look 100 years from now, I would completely agree with you. And what is interesting is how long will different pieces take to come? Because some of it's already here. If you talk about sat-nav, really simple example. I take part in trail races. Until recently, we were not allowed to carry sat-navs because it was considered not real. You had to have maps and compasses. Now we still have to have maps and compasses, but we're obliged to carry sat-navs because if we get into trouble, they'll save our lives. So even for the hardened experts, sat-navs are now such a major feature. The whole mechanics of how Uber works is what I think Chuck is talking about already happening. So whilst Chuck and I may disagree with the timeline, it has started. It started a few years ago. Who'd like to chip in on those thoughts? Melanie.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a world coming that involves much more deep learning, AI, use of data. And so I love the vision that painted. What I don't know that I agree with is that it will completely replace market research. And there are three P's that I would say for feeling that way. And the first is for all of this type of data use, you're still going to need like permission, right? Permission to scrape use. I mean, you can use some public data, but you're still really going to need permission to use some of that. And I think that's that duty of care and researchers and data ethics. That's where our expertise in gathering data permissions really comes into play. So we all need to be really good at that, by the way, in this new world. And if you're not involving yourself in data ethics and data permissions, you really, really should, and keep yourself relevant in that area. The second one, though, is that the data that's out there, it's not always very good at predicting what will happen. You sometimes have to use research to what if I use this message? And then you get feedback that says, oh, that message is completely wrong for my audience. I hate that message. Don't use that message. You can go out and test it in the wild, but the consequences for a mistake can be high. And so I think that there's still some prediction element of the future that will really require market research. And so there'll be a place for that. And the second is in the presentation of data, and the presentation of stories and the presentation of outcomes, and using professionals to actually present. And then I couldn't think of a P for this one, but maybe it's psychology that's a soft P, but it's the why. I think that there's a lot of AI, and deep learning is getting good at a lot of things, but they still aren't really good at watching someone's face, understanding the values and the why of the things that we do. So I fully believe that the more of this is coming, but I believe it will come into our space very similar to how online did and how the passive data is now, and it will make us rounder and better and stronger, but it will not completely erase market research as we know it today, in my opinion.
I agree. And
okay, Greg, I'm going to go to Laura, who put her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to pile on what Melanie said. Totally agree. And I just add one more perspective. Me, who sat on the client side for so many years, I think there's a lot of work that we as researchers do that maybe isn't noticed so much, which is helping shape and define what that business question is and what are the questions that we need to ask. Rare are the times where somebody comes to us and says, I needed this, we go get it, and we bring it as a courier. I think a lot of our role is helping shape what do we need out of all this information. So as we become less the couriers of data and more shaping the business and back to that impact that I so want to see happen, I think there's a big role for us, but it will be different than how we spend a lot of our time now.
Greg.
So I'm going to just kind of keep adding on to this. Melanie, I think that your main point, we'll go with the soft P in psychology for why, is kind of fundamentally it. I was having a conversation with a research leader from a large CPG company who said, as long as I know what's going to sell, I don't care why. And that's exactly right. With the possible exception of significant, got lost in my head, with the exception of new things. Like if you're working on tweaks to your old stuff, it works incredibly well. Predictive analytics, if you've got kind of the right kind of feeds going in there, it works incredibly well. When you start shifting into things that look more truly new, it doesn't work well. And that's where understanding why can lead you in good directions. Not understanding why leads you in just a scattershot direction.
My answer to that question is, why was important? Why was important? That's the difference between correlation and causation. If you just look at some correlation and say that's causation, then you don't know the why. That's the difference. But now what's happening is, because of deep learning, your model is constantly changing. So if you are wrong, you are not wrong for a year, like you did research this year. If you are wrong, your regression equation is wrong, you are wrong for a year and more, assuming that was done correct next time. But here, constant data stream coming in. Using deep learning, the computer itself is writing the code to accommodate the new data. When you have that kind of dynamic processing of data, it doesn't matter why. Because if you look at, once again, Amazon, how did they become a bookseller to the world's largest retailer? They're constantly learning. And the reason why it won't be 100 years, we thought but I first tried to go into this field, I thought it'll be about 20 years. But for the past few years, especially after the onset of COVID, for whatever reason, all these costs are coming down rapidly. It's just mind-boggling. So I put the timeline between 5 and 10, and it wouldn't matter. And with regard to permission of the data and things like that, they are all important. By the way, I am I sit on the board of the Standards Committee in Toronto and in Canada. So it's not that I consider not important, but they've all changed. Consider about privacy. 20 years ago, you'll be horrified that you are tracked wherever you go, you are photographed. It's such an invasion of privacy. Now it has changed. If you don't give your name, you don't get to use 90% of the apps on your phone. So you just give up a lot of things. So different things will happen. What will happen, I don't know. But we can't apply today's paradigm as to a changed world. So I still think this is a tsunami that's coming. And either we can look at it and say where we're going to fit in this and say, no, we have this ethics or whatever, and it's going to stay the same 10 years from today. And so we have to do the same thing. That I'm not sure.
No, I agree with you. I definitely didn't think we would stay the same. Sorry, that was my puppy. I definitely don't think we'll stay the same. I think that there is a tsunami coming, but I think that tsunami will cause the whole, water to rise for everyone. I don't think it's going to be 100% replacement was my only point. But I definitely think that it'll be different 10 years from now and different again 10 years from then.
I think
that could be. I'm not saying it would be eradicated. That's one possibility, that it could be gone. Marketing could be gone. But I think the tsunami itself, I'm fairly convinced, because it's not happening because of marketing research. It's happening because of things that are happening outside of marketing research. Just consider autonomous driving. This is a classic example. How correct it has to be every single time it makes a turn, every time it judges an object, and so on. When you consider that all the market segments we do and regulations we do, or whatever we do, are child's play. Okay, so that's why I think marketing, it will have profound effect on marketing research. And with all the, what you call cloud computing, you don't need to have a server. You have access to the world's largest computer, which can store any amount and process any amount of data. And this one is not science fiction, it's happening now.
Yeah. And our jobs as insights professionals should be to help navigate this evolution and to evolve ourselves and then to be, data and method agnostic and more about what's the best way to get the insight that the business needs and evolve with it.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution or extinction.
Right. With that, that's been fantastic. Let's just go round the panel in the order that we took. We started with. Just any closing thoughts. So I will give Gregg a chance by chipping in myself. The most heated discussion was in chat, not on the panel, and it's around this issue of panel quality. And I don't think that we will see substantial improvement in the next 5 years. Let's have a look in 5 years. But I suspect that I used to say that clients wanted to improve panel quality the way I wanted to lose weight, which is I tried everything except eating less. But I did try really hard. I tried all sorts of schemes. I just didn't want it enough. The pandemic has now helped. But I think we're going to see that data problem. We're going to see initiatives. We're going to see some people refuse to go down into the sewer sampling. But I think in 5 years, we'll be exactly where we are now. So Gregg, your thoughts summing up all the various topics we've had.
Man, I wish I could come up with something brilliant.
That would be intimidating for the rest.
So I think if I look out a few years, I think that the value of what this function brings is going to be better and better and better. How it's structured in an organization, how the suppliers are structured, could be incredibly different. In fact, I anticipate on the brand side, there may not be a market research department. There's going to be people doing research, focused on insights, focused on bringing all these things together, but it may not be market research. But I will say that every year that I'm in this, particularly the past few years, looking towards the future, it just stays exciting to me. I love my job. So I fully anticipate more and more and more change, and that makes me happy. And I think sample quality will be solved within 5 years.
Laura.
I'm not so sure this is a summary comment, but I'll leave as a parting thought. I studied something called futurology, and one of the things that we learned is that the closer in that we try to predict things, the more off we are. We're far better at predicting the future 50 years or more in advance, but anything less than 50 years can be quite fuzzy. And I think about a interview I had with Lenny Murphy 5 or 6 years ago, where we were going on and on about Google Glass. And that's not a huge factor right now. Now, I think wearables still will be. We just don't know when and how it's going to change. To Chuck's point, I think in 10 years, our jobs will be different. I hope they are. When I think of what I started doing when I started in this is very different from what we do now. I think a lot of things we can passively collect that we used to have to go and literally knock on doors to gather. But I still think our function of helping companies define what they don't know, where their internal spiral thinking isn't helping them get out of the box and helping us figure out what are the questions that need to be answered. I still think that's a critical role.
Melanie.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to stick based with the last words I said, evolution or extinction, right? Like everything really is changing, and looking back at the careers of everyone that I see here, every one of them have reinvented themselves several times over the course of their career, you know, from being a traditional researcher and moving into technology and moving into data and privacy and ethics. And my biggest encouragement to everyone is that the world is shifting and our industry is rightfully shifting as a result. And if you haven't taken stock in where's the industry going and how am I set up to meet the needs of the new world, I hope you'll do that, because it really is shifting.
Absolutely. Kristin.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Melanie's point, and I posted this in the chat because I think Pavi Gupta at J&J has a really good sort of like synthesis of like working with traditional research data and new forms. But I do think that our role as researchers is really that of data translators. Regardless of what the source or the method is, like to be able to really translate and distill data into meaning for businesses, I think is important to us. And then I would say, my last takeaway would be, like really look at the evolution of your business model. Like I said, I think that there's a ton of pricing pressure, a lot of commoditization. And a lot of the traditional business models, particularly for full service research firms, are antiquated and are driving a lot of the bad behaviors, and I think resulting in less than ethical, not only data, but respondent interaction. And so it's something that we really need to be cognizant of. Unlike Gregg, I do not believe that sampling quality will be fixed in the next 5 years, only because I've probably sat on at least 15 panels with Melanie in the last 20 years where we've talked about data quality, and I would say it's not improved at all.
I was just trying to be an optimist.
I know, Gregg.
So, Chuck, final thoughts.
Final thought, yeah. Actually, I agree with everyone on the panel. And I don't disagree with anything that's been said. My only thing is, change is coming faster than most people realize. At least it's my belief that it's changing, because it is not as visible during the internet time. It was visible. You have iPad, iPhone, more and more. Now here, Intel is, new chips are coming into the market that nobody is aware of. Okay, they don't understand the implications of what autonomous driving, how much AI it needs to do that, and so things are going faster and faster and faster, and that is not visible now. It's not visible. It doesn't know. We don't know what's happening, and the more I look at it, the more I find, why can't this is child's play? What marketing research is child's play to the technology that can drive an autonomous car, so. Anyway, so I'm thinking maybe it's coming faster. I could be wrong. Yeah, I'm usually wrong anyway.
We all are.
We all are.
But my view is we are not 20 years away from it. We are somewhere between 5 to 10 years away from it.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, all of you there in the audience who've been joining in the conversation, asking questions, talking to each other, and raising points of view, getting heated and then sorting it out. That was quite nice to see as well. So thank you, everybody in there. That was great to see people playing nicely. Big shout out again to our sponsors. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and look forward to seeing you at the next event